My name is Michael Hayes, and for 15 years my son believed I abandoned him. If you asked Noah who I was, he would probably say the same thing everyone else believed. He walked away. He didn't want to be a father. It wasn't true. But when you're a child, you don't question the story the people you love tell you. You believe it. I don't blame Noah for that. I blame myself for believing the truth would eventually find its way to him. It never did. 15 years ago, my life looked ordinary. I was 34 years old, worked as a structural engineer, and had been married to Laura Hayes for almost 9 years. We lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Denver. Nothing fancy, just a modest 2-story house with a maple tree in the front yard and a swing I'd built with my own hands. That swing was Noah's favorite place in the world. Every evening after work, he'd run outside before I even had time to change clothes. "Dad, higher." I'd pretend I couldn't push him any higher. "You'll hit the clouds." He'd laugh so hard the whole street could hear him. Those were the moments I thought would last forever. Looking back now, I realized they were already slipping away. Laura and I hadn't been happy for a long time. We never screamed at each other. There were no broken dishes or slammed doors. Instead, our house became painfully quiet. Conversations turned into short answers. Dinner was eaten in silence. She spent more time on her phone than talking to me. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, she'd smile without looking at me. "I'm just tired." I wanted to believe her, because believing that was easier than facing what was really happening. One Friday evening, I came home earlier than usual. I planned to surprise Noah with tickets to a baseball game that weekend. He had been talking about seeing his favorite team play for months. I could already picture the excitement on his face. When I opened the front door, the house was strangely quiet. No cartoons, no laughter, no footsteps running toward me, just silence. I walked into the kitchen and found a note taped to the refrigerator. "Noah is at my mother's tonight." Nothing else. Laura's car wasn't in the driveway. I called her. No answer. An hour later I tried again. Still nothing. Around 9 that evening she finally walked through the front door. She smiled when she saw me. Not a warm smile. The kind people wear when they've already made a decision. "We need to talk." Every married man knows those 4 words. I set the baseball tickets on the kitchen table. She looked at them for less than a second. Then she looked back at me. "I don't love you anymore." The room felt smaller. I honestly thought she was joking. "What?" "I've been unhappy for years. We can fix this." She slowly shook her head. "No, Michael. There isn't anything left to fix." I asked if there was someone else. She hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. My stomach dropped. "Who is he?" "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." She crossed her arms. "I've already made my decision." I spent the entire night trying to save my marriage. She spent the entire night explaining why it couldn't be saved. Neither of us slept. At sunrise, I heard Noah laughing outside as Laura's mother brought him home. I forced a smile before opening the door. He ran straight into my arms. "Dad, guess what? Grandma let me stay up until 10. I hugged him tighter than ever before. I had no idea that this would be one of the last mornings I'd wake up as the father he knew. For the next few weeks, I convinced myself this was just another rough patch. People saved marriages every day. Why couldn't we? I suggested counseling. Laura refused. I asked if we could spend more time together. She said she was busy. I even took a week off work so we could take Noah on a small vacation. She canceled 2 days before we were supposed to leave. "I already have plans." Those words echoed in my head. I already have plans. Not we. Something wasn't right. I just didn't want to admit it. A month later, the divorce papers arrived. I remember staring at the envelope for nearly 10 minutes before opening it. 9 years together, reduced to a stack of legal documents. I wasn't angry. I was heartbroken. But one page caught my attention immediately. Laura wasn't just asking for a divorce. She wanted full custody of Noah. I read that sentence over and over. There had to be a mistake. She couldn't honestly believe I was a bad father. I had never missed a birthday, never missed a school play, never forgotten a bedtime story. Noah and I built model airplanes together. We played catch every Sunday. He still asked me to check for monsters before he went to sleep. How could she possibly think I didn't belong in his life? I called her immediately. She answered after the third ring. "Laura, why are you asking for full custody? It'll be easier." "Easier for who?" "For Noah. He needs both of us." She sighed. "No, Michael. He needs stability. I am stable. You work too much. I work to support our family. Our family is over." The line went silent. Then she hung up. The following week, I hired the best family lawyer I could afford. He looked through every document before leaning back in his chair. Do you drink? Rarely. Any arrests? No. Violence? Never. He nodded. Then this should be straightforward. I believed him. I wish I hadn't. A few days later, I picked Noah up from school for what was supposed to be my scheduled afternoon with him. The moment he climbed into my truck, he smiled. Dad, can we get burgers? You read my mind. We spent 2 hours laughing over fries and milkshakes. He told me about his teacher, his spelling test, a kid who cheated during recess. Listening to him made everything else disappear. For a little while, life felt normal again. When I drove him back to Laura's house, he hugged me before getting out. I love you, Dad. I love you too, buddy. Those would be the last words he spoke to me for a very long time. 3 nights later, everything changed. It was almost 11 when someone pounded on my front door. Not knocked. Pounded. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. Michael Hayes. Yes. We need you to come with us. What happened? One of them glanced at his partner. Your wife has filed a criminal complaint. I frowned. What complaint? The officer looked directly into my eyes. She claims you assaulted her during your custody exchange yesterday. For a second, I honestly thought they had the wrong person. Yesterday? I wasn't even near her. You'll have a chance to explain. Cold handcuffs closed around my wrists. As my neighbors watched from their windows, I was placed into the back of a police car. I kept asking the same question. There has to be some mistake. No one answered. I had no idea that the lie Laura had just told would not only destroy my reputation, it would also convince my own son that his father had chosen to abandon him forever. I spent the night in a holding cell trying to understand how my life had unraveled so quickly. The accusation made no sense. According to Laura's statement, I had grabbed her by the arm during the custody exchange, shoved her against her car, and threatened her while Noah watched from the back seat. None of it had happened. The truth was much simpler. I had dropped Noah off at the curb, smiled, waved goodbye, and driven away. The entire exchange had lasted less than 2 minutes. I never even got out of my truck. By the next afternoon, my attorney, Richard Coleman, arrived at the station. He looked surprisingly calm. Michael, he said, placing a folder on the table. I think we can prove she's lying. I stared at him. How? He opened the folder and slid a photograph toward me. It was taken from a security camera across the street from Laura's neighborhood. You stayed inside your truck the entire time. I leaned closer. The timestamp matched exactly. There I was, parked at the curb. Noah stepped out, waved goodbye, and ran toward the house. 10 seconds later, I drove away. No confrontation. No argument. No assault. For the first time in almost 24 hours, I could breathe again. So this is over? Richard hesitated. The criminal case probably is. Probably. He sighed. Family court is a different story. A week later, the prosecutor dropped the charges. There wasn't enough evidence to move forward. I thought that would be the end of it. Instead, it was only the beginning. Laura's attorney walked into family court holding a thick stack of papers. Even though the criminal case had been dismissed, he argued that the allegations showed a pattern of concerning behavior. My lawyer objected repeatedly. The judge listened to both sides for hours. Then Laura took the stand. She cried. She said she was terrified of me. She claimed she had hidden the truth for years because she wanted to protect Noah. Listening to her was surreal. She described a man I didn't recognize. A violent husband. An unpredictable father. A monster. Every word was a lie. But she told those lies with tears in her eyes. And people believed tears. When it was finally my turn to testify, I answered every question honestly. Yes, I worked long hours. Yes, our marriage had problems. No, I had never hurt my wife. No, I had never frightened my son. Richard presented the security footage. It completely disproved her assault claim. The judge acknowledged it. For a brief moment, I thought justice had won. Then came the ruling. The false assault allegation couldn't be proven. But because the divorce was already highly contentious, the judge believed it would be less disruptive for Noah to remain primarily with his mother. I was granted visitation every other weekend and one evening each week. It wasn't what I wanted, but at least I'd still be his father. Or so I thought. The first weekend I was supposed to see Noah, Laura called an hour before pickup. He's sick. The next visit? He has a birthday party. The one after that. We're out of town. Week after week, there was another excuse. Richard filed motions with the court. By the time hearings were scheduled, months had passed. Laura always had a reason. Always another explanation. The judge warned her more than once. Nothing changed. Then one afternoon, I received something I never expected. A small white envelope. Inside was a drawing Noah had made at school. It showed a house, his mom, a tall man standing beside her, and Noah holding both of their hands. In the corner, there was another stick figure, far away, crossed out with a black crayon. His teacher had written underneath, "Draw the people who are part of your family." I couldn't stop staring at it. That crossed out figure was me. That's when I realized the hardest part wasn't losing custody. The hardest part was knowing someone was slowly teaching my son that I had never wanted him in the first place. I refused to give up. Every Sunday evening, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote Noah a letter. Sometimes I told him about my week. Sometimes I shared funny stories from when I was his age. Other times, I simply wrote one sentence. "I love you, and I'm thinking about you today." I mailed every single one. Not a single letter was answered. Months later, several envelopes came back with a red stamp across the front. Returned to sender. I stood in my driveway holding them for nearly 10 minutes. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Instead, I placed every unopened letter into a cardboard box in my attic. I told myself that one day Noah would read them, even if it took years. Birthdays became the hardest days of the year. Every birthday, I bought him a present. When he turned 8, I bought him the baseball glove we'd looked at together months before everything fell apart. Laura mailed it back. When he turned 9, I bought him a mountain bike. Returned. At 10, it was a telescope. Returned. At 11, a guitar. Returned. Eventually, my attic filled with unopened birthday presents. It looked less like storage, and more like a museum dedicated to the childhood I was missing. Richard never stopped fighting for me. Every few months, we'd file another motion asking the court to enforce the visitation order. Laura always had another explanation. Noah doesn't want to go. He's anxious. He's afraid. Afraid? The word crushed me. Afraid of what? I'd never even raised my voice at him. During one hearing, the judge finally ordered family counseling. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful. Maybe Noah would hear my side. Maybe we'd finally sit in the same room again. The appointment was scheduled. I counted the days. Then, 2 days before the session, Laura canceled. She claimed Noah had developed severe anxiety, and his therapist recommended postponing. The session was never rescheduled. Life moved forward whether I wanted it to or not. I buried myself in work. The engineering company promoted me twice. Eventually, I became a partner. The long hours helped. Not because they made me forget Noah. Nothing could do that. They simply gave me less time to think. My coworkers celebrated promotions and bonuses. I celebrated surviving another Father's Day without hearing my son's voice. One afternoon, nearly 7 years after the divorce, I was driving home from a job site when traffic slowed near Noah's middle school. Students poured out of the front entrance. I wasn't looking for him, but then I saw him. He had grown nearly a foot taller. His face had changed. He wasn't the little boy who used to beg me to push him higher on the swing anymore. He looked like a teenager. I pulled into an empty parking space across the street. Not to follow him, just to watch him for a moment. He laughed with his friends before walking toward a black SUV. A man stepped out. Tall, confident. He ruffled Noah's hair the same way I used to. Noah smiled. Then he hugged him. "Dad," I heard him shout. The man smiled back. "Ready to go, buddy?" Noah climbed into the passenger seat. The SUV drove away. I stayed there long after it disappeared. Not because I was jealous. Because I realized something that broke my heart. He wasn't pretending anymore. As far as Noah knew, that man really was his father. And I was nothing more than a stranger whose name he barely remembered. That night, I walked into the attic. I looked at the shelves filled with birthday gifts, Christmas presents, photographs, school clippings, and every letter I'd ever written. I ran my hand across one of the boxes and quietly made myself a promise. I don't care if it takes another 10 years. I'll keep every piece of the truth. Because one day my son is going to ask what really happened. And when he does, I'll be ready. 10 years passed. The boxes in my attic kept growing. One for letters. One for birthday cards. One for Christmas gifts. One for newspaper clippings, photographs, and court documents. Everything was carefully labeled. Not because I enjoyed holding on to the past. Because I was terrified that one day my son would ask me a question and I wouldn't be able to prove the answer. Every receipt, every court order, every returned package, every unopened envelope. I kept them all. Friends thought I was wasting my life. You need to let him go, Mike. You've done everything you could. He's an adult now. They meant well, but they didn't understand. A father doesn't stop being a father because someone signs a piece of paper. Every birthday, I still bought Noah a gift. I just stopped trying to mail them. There was no point. Instead, I wrapped each one, wrote the year on the tag, and placed it in the attic beside the others. Sometimes I imagined him opening them one day. Other times, I wondered if he'd throw them all away. Either way, they would be his choice, not mine. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I was finishing paperwork at the office when my assistant knocked on the door. Michael. She looked nervous. There's someone here asking for you. I don't have any appointments. He said it's personal. I walked into the lobby. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. He was taller than me now. Broad shoulders. Dark hair. The same blue eyes he'd had as a little boy. Noah. 21 years old. He looked at me with a cold expression. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. So, you're Michael Hayes. Not Dad. Just my name. I swallowed hard. I am. He folded his arms. I only have one question. I nodded. Ask me anything. His jaw tightened. Why did you leave? The words hit me harder than anything I'd ever experienced. Not because I hadn't expected them, because I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head for 15 years, and it still hurt. I never left. His eyes narrowed. My mom said you disappeared. I didn't. She said you stopped calling. I never stopped. She said you didn't want me. I wanted you every single day. He shook his head. You're lying. Without another word, he turned around and walked toward the exit. Panic took over. Noah. He stopped but didn't turn around. Please, just give me 5 minutes. If you still believe I abandoned you after that, I'll never bother you again. Several long seconds passed. Finally, he looked over his shoulder. You have 5 minutes. I led him upstairs to my office. He looked uncomfortable the entire time, like he was somewhere he didn't belong. I unlocked a storage room, then another door. His eyes followed me as I pulled down an old cardboard box. Then another. Then another. By the time I finished, 7 large boxes covered the floor. He frowned. What is all this? I picked up the smallest box and handed it to him. Your 7th birthday. He slowly opened it. Inside was a brand new baseball glove, still wrapped. The tag hanging from it read, To Noah. Love, Dad. 2018. He didn't say anything. I handed him another box. Then another. A telescope. A guitar. A laptop. A camera. Every gift still unopened. Every tag still attached. He looked back at me. Confusion had replaced the anger. I quietly opened the final box. Hundreds of envelopes filled the inside. Every single one had his name written on the front. I wrote to you every week. I never stopped. His hands began to shake as he picked up the first envelope. Across the front, in bright red ink, were 3 words that changed the expression on his face forever. Return to sender. Noah stared at the envelope for what felt like forever. His fingers traced the faded red stamp. Return to sender. Then he picked up another. And another. Every single one carried the same words. He looked at me, his voice barely above a whisper. You really sent these? Every week. For 15 years. He slowly opened one of the envelopes. The paper inside had yellowed with age. I recognized it immediately. It was the letter I'd written on his 12th birthday. I remembered every word. Happy birthday, buddy. I don't know if you'll ever read this. Today I bought you the telescope we looked at in the mall last month. Maybe someday we'll use it together and finally find Saturn like we promised. No matter what you've been told, I love you. Always. Dad. When Noah finished reading, he didn't speak. Instead, he reached into the box again. This time he pulled out a thick folder. Court documents. Visitation orders. Certified mail receipts. Copies of every motion Richard had filed. The police report. The prosecutor's dismissal notice. Page after page after page. His eyes moved faster with each document. Then he stopped. What is this? He held up a DVD in a clear plastic sleeve. I hadn't looked at it in years. Security footage. From the day your mother said I attacked her. He looked confused. You have the video? I never threw it away. I still owned an old external DVD drive. After a few minutes, the footage appeared on my office computer. The security camera overlooked Laura Street. The date and time appeared in the corner. Noah watched silently. My truck pulled to the curb. His 8-year-old self climbed out. I waved. He waved back. 10 seconds later, I drove away. That was it. No shouting. No argument. No assault. Nothing. The recording ended. Noah didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the black screen long after the video was over. Finally, he whispered. She said. He couldn't finish the sentence. I nodded. I know. She told me I saw you hurt her. I know. I believed her. I know. Those 3 words carried 15 years of heartbreak. Not accusation. Not anger. Just sadness. Noah sat down and buried his face in his hands. For the first time since he'd walked into my office, he looked like the little boy I'd lost. I hated you. His voice cracked. I told people you abandoned me. I told everyone I didn't have a father. Tears rolled down his face. I was wrong. I sat across from him. I never blamed you. You were a child. You trusted your mother. What else were you supposed to do? He wiped his eyes. Why didn't you come find me when I turned 18? I smiled sadly. I did. He looked up. What? I hired a private investigator. I found out where you were. But I couldn't force you to talk to me. So I waited. I wanted the first conversation to be your choice. He stared at me in disbelief. You were waiting. All this time. Every day. Neither of us noticed that it had started raining outside. The office had grown quiet. Noah slowly looked around the room. Framed photographs covered one wall. Not family portraits. Pictures of him. His little league team. His elementary school science fair. His high school graduation. His college acceptance announcement from the local newspaper. He looked back at me. You weren't even there. No. So how? I smiled. I never stopped following your life. I just had to do it from a distance. I went to every baseball game I could. I stood outside the fence. I watched your graduation from the back row after buying a public ticket. I never came close enough for you to notice. I made one promise to myself. If seeing me would make your life harder, I'd stay invisible. Noah's eyes filled with tears again. For the first time in 15 years, he stood up, walked across the room, and wrapped his arms around me. It was awkward at first. 2 strangers trying to hug like father and son. Then I felt his shoulders begin to shake. I'm sorry, he whispered. And after waiting half my life to hear those words, I finally hugged my son again. Neither of us said a word for a long time. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that comes after years of pain finally begin to crack. When Noah stepped back, he wiped his eyes and gave me a weak smile. I don't even know where to start. I laughed quietly. How about lunch? He smiled for the first time that day. I'd like that. We drove to a small diner a few miles from my office. Ironically, it was the same place where I'd taken him for burgers the week before everything fell apart. The booths had been replaced. The walls had been repainted. But the smell of fresh fries was exactly the same. As soon as we sat down, Noah looked around. I don't remember this place. I do, I said. You were 7. You spilled ketchup all over my shirt and laughed for 10 minutes. He chuckled. I really did that. You insisted red was my color. For the first time in years, we laughed together. It felt strange, almost unfamiliar, but it also felt right. Over the next 3 hours, Noah asked question after question. What was I like as a kid? What was my first word? Did I really hate vegetables? I answered every one. You called every dog buddy. You refused to sleep without your dinosaur blanket. You cried for an hour when your goldfish died. His eyes widened. I actually remember the goldfish. You named him Captain. Noah laughed. I had forgotten that. Little by little, memories started returning. Not because someone told him what to remember, but because they had always been there, buried beneath years of lies. Before we left the diner, Noah became serious again. I need to ask you something. Anything. Did Mom really make all of this up? I took a deep breath. I honestly don't know how it started. I know she lied. I know she kept us apart. But I don't know whether she convinced herself those lies were true, or whether she knew exactly what she was doing. Noah stared out the window. I have to talk to her. I figured you would. Were you ever going to tell me not to? No. She's still your mother. No matter what happened between us. He nodded slowly. I don't know if I can forgive her. You don't have to decide today. 2 days later, Noah called me. His voice sounded exhausted. I want to see Mom. I could tell immediately that it hadn't gone well. What happened? At first, she denied everything. But when I showed her the letters, he paused. She broke down. I stayed silent. Noah continued. She admitted she threw your letters away. My chest tightened. She admitted she sent the presents back. Another long pause. And his voice cracked. She admitted that she told me you stopped loving me because she was afraid I'd choose you if I knew the truth. I closed my eyes. Even after all those years, hearing it out loud still hurt. Noah sighed. She kept saying she thought she was protecting me. What did you say? I asked her one question. What question? Did you ever stop to think that I deserved the truth? He didn't tell me what she answered. He didn't have to. Sometimes silence says enough. Over the following months, Noah and I slowly began rebuilding something we'd never truly had the chance to experience. We met every Saturday. Sometimes we had dinner. Sometimes we went fishing. Sometimes we simply sat on my back porch talking until midnight. There was no way to recover 15 lost years. We both knew that. So instead of mourning the time we'd lost, we started making new memories. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic together, Noah picked up the very first baseball glove I'd bought him. He slipped it onto his hand and smiled. You know, I think you still owe me a game of catch. I laughed. I've been waiting 15 years to hear you say that. We walked into the backyard. The same backyard where I'd once taught him how to throw. The swing was gone. The maple tree was much taller now. But the yard still felt like home. Noah tossed me the ball. Ready, Dad? For a second, I couldn't answer, because it had been 15 years since I'd heard him call me that. The first time Noah called me Dad again, I smiled the entire drive home. I don't even remember the route I took. I just remember gripping the steering wheel and laughing through tears. For 15 years, I had imagined hearing that word again. Nothing I imagined came close to the real thing. The months turned into a year. Slowly, we became part of each other's everyday lives. He started calling me after work just to ask how my day had been. Sometimes we'd watch football together. Sometimes we'd argue over which pizza place in town was better. We even started taking an annual father and son fishing trip. They weren't grand adventures. They were ordinary moments. And after everything we'd lost, ordinary felt extraordinary. One Saturday afternoon, Noah arrived carrying a large cardboard box. I found these in Mom's attic, he said. Inside were dozens of photographs. Pictures of us from before the divorce. One caught my attention immediately. It showed Noah sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old. On the back, in Laura's handwriting, were the words, Michael and Noah, best friends. I stared at it for a long time. Noah quietly sat beside me. I'm sorry you lost all those years. I shook my head. So am I. But we can't change them. He nodded. We can make sure we don't lose any more. A few months later, Noah invited me to dinner at his apartment. When I arrived, there was someone waiting to meet me. A young woman with a warm smile. This is Emma, Noah said. My girlfriend. She smiled and held out her hand. I've heard a lot about you. I laughed. I hope only the good things. She looked at Noah before answering. Recently? Yes. The three of us spent hours talking. Watching Noah laugh across the dinner table, I realized something. For years, I had dreamed of getting my little boy back. Instead, life had given me the chance to know the man he had become, and I was incredibly proud of him. About 6 months later, Noah called me early on a Sunday morning. Dad. His voice sounded nervous. You busy? Never too busy for you. I need to tell you something. Okay. There was a long pause. Then he laughed. You're going to be a grandfather. For a second, I couldn't speak. I leaned against the kitchen counter as tears filled my eyes. A grandfather? You happy? I laughed. Son, I've been happy since the day you walked into my office. Last week, my grandson turned 3. After everyone left the birthday party, Noah and I stayed behind cleaning the backyard. My grandson ran toward the old maple tree. Daddy. Noah scooped him into his arms. Watching them together was like looking through a window into the past. Except this time, nothing was being taken away. No lies. No courtrooms. No years stolen. Just a father loving his son. The way it should have been all along. Before we left, Noah wrapped an arm around my shoulders. You know something? What? I used to think you abandoned me. He smiled. Now I know. You never stopped being my dad. Those words meant more than any court victory ever could. People often ask me if I regret waiting so many years. The answer is simple. I'd wait another 15 if it meant hearing my son call me dad one more time. Because the truth has a strange way of surviving. It can be buried by lies, hidden by anger, silenced by time. But if someone keeps holding on to it, one day, it finds its way home.